Bifocal Chapter 17 J. I shifted restlessly in the pew. It was amazing how anything short of a bed of nails could be this hard and uncomfortable. Even more amazing was how much harder and more uncomfortable they became as the service went on. The only thing other than the hardness of the pews that kept me awake was music. At least we got to stand up and sing along. There were no hymn books anymore. The words were projected onto a big screen at the front, and on the 8th day God created technology, and he saw that it was good. The whole altar was taken up by the band. Did Jesus have a band? If he'd gone to this church, he would have had a backup band instead of disciples. The drummer was pounding away at his skins. He was segregated from the rest of the band behind a clear plastic half wall. It was supposed to be there to muffle the sound, but I think it had more to do with keeping him away from the singers. They were all female, and a couple of them were okay to look at. While they all looked pretty innocent, the drummer looked like somebody who'd been partying the night before, playing some club with a heavy metal band. He was a little rough around the edges. I had to admit that all in all they weren't bad, and I found myself tapping my foot along with the music, even if I wasn't singing. Certainly I could sing along. All the words were right up on the big screen, and on the 8th day, God created digital projectors. Now I knew I was getting bored. The music stopped. The band members sat down, and the minister came to the front. He was equipped with a special hands-free microphone system that sat on his head and wrapped around his mouth. The only people I ever saw using something like that were the drive-through operators at fast food places and singers on videos. I could imagine him asking if I wanted an apple pie with my meal, more than I could see him belting out a tune and shaking his booty dressed up in a skimpy outfit. I shuddered at that image. I needed something different in my head. I looked up at the singers. There were at least two I could picture in that skimpy outfit. That was a much better visual. Thinking about that might save a couple more minutes off the sermon. A nice little fantasy to while away the time. Maybe not the most spiritual thing to be doing, but at least I was here. Maybe God would know it was against my will, but it should still count for something. My mother nudged me gently on the side. "Are you listening to what he's saying?" she whispered. "Every word," I lied. Now back to my fantasy life. "He's talking about the terrorists," she said. My fantasy ground to a halt. I perked up my ears and sat a little straighter. "It's in the news and it's on the television, radio, and internet," he said. "Our little community has become known internationally as a site for terrorism. Who would have thought that any of that was possible? Certainly not me. But here we sit, wondering, pondering, trying to make sense of the whole thing. How could members of this community be so filled with anger and rage that they set out to plan to kill and maim innocent people?" He paused. "Now I know you say that they are not part of our community, our church community, but they are people who live on our streets, shop in our stores, work in our factories and businesses, and attend our schools. Why? It's a question I've asked myself time and time again since I first became aware of this story. Why would they feel this anger? Why would they want to plan violence against people? Why would they want to take the lives of innocents? Why indeed?" He paused again for dramatic effect. "The answer, my friends, is simple. Evil, hatred, the devil. They were the reasons that these people did what they did, planned what they planned. Why else would they turn against their faith, the loving, peaceful teachings of Muhammad and the Quran, and seek to kill? What is the answer to such hatred? Do we match anger with anger, hatred with hatred, violence with violence, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? These are the words of Exodus. So strongly is the concept believed that it is repeated time and time again in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. These passages talk about retributive justice. They talk about vengeance against those who have been wronged. They talk about our right to seek retribution. While punishment is deemed proper and right, however, these passages refer to the limits of that punishment. A man who has been blinded in one eye has no right to blind both eyes of the person who has committed the original crime. These passages speak of limits and tolerance. One of my heroes is Gandhi. He said succinctly that an eye for an eye would make the whole world blind. And we know another living man, living long before the time of Gandhi, who would agree with that. His name was Jesus of Nazareth. This is what Jesus said in urging his followers. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Jesus knew that the answer to hate was not hate, but love. The answer to violence is not violence, but peace. The answer to evil is not evil, but good. One of the foundations of our faith, one of the principles on which we rest is simple. Love thy neighbor. Not love some of thy neighbors, not love the ones who are nicer or near, certainly not love just those who are Christian. Love all thy neighbors. Our role, our duty as told to us by Jesus, is as simple as that. Show love, acceptance, tolerance, caring to all the people. As we go forth today in Jesus' name, go forth and practice what Jesus has taught. Love thy neighbors, all of them. Do as Jesus would do. The minister sat down and the band started playing again. As people started to get up, I stayed seated. Powerful words. I wasn't used to hearing powerful words coming out of this place, certainly not words that had meaning for me. "Are you asleep?" my father asked. He was standing over me. "No, just thinking about what he said." My father looked surprised but happy. It's good when a sermon can do that. This one hit particularly close to home, didn't it? Not so much close to home as close to school. My father, your grandfather, used to say that the purpose of church was to comfort the troubled and trouble the comfortable. I was not sure which one of those categories I fit into, I said. Could be both. Come on. We waded through the crowd still lingering in the aisles. My father shook hands with some people along the way and exchanged small talk. Mom was already in the lobby talking to a woman I didn't recognize. She introduced the woman to me and my father. I shook hands and mumbled hello. "Miss McMillan told me that she saw you on television," my mother said. "Yes, I was very impressed at your efforts," she said. "Your parents must be very proud of the way you volunteered to help." "Yes, very proud," my father said, and my mother nodded in agreement. I felt like telling everybody who asked that I wasn't really as much a volunteer as I was ordered to volunteer, but I didn't say anything. It felt good to have people think nice things about me. And, if it happened again, I think I really would volunteer to help. "We raised him to try and to do the right thing," my mother said. "Sort of like today's sermon." "That was a wonderful sermon," the woman gushed. "Well, we better get going. My stomach says it's getting pretty close to breakfast time," my father said. "You hungry, Jay?" When am I ever not hungry? Good question. It was one of the rituals of church that we always went out to Harvey's for breakfast after the service. This was like a trade-off. I came, I got bacon and eggs and pancakes. I liked bacon and eggs and pancakes. Sure, I could have the same thing if we went home, but it wasn't really the same. My mother went up to the counter and ordered, while my dad and I grabbed a paper and sat down at the table. My mother always went up and got the food for us. She insisted. It was sort of like her doing the cooking. I didn't care who cooked as long as I got to do the eating. "Front page again," Dad said. He pointed at an article about the arrests. The header over this one was "Homegrown Terrorism." I was more interested in the homegrown sports section. I rummaged through the paper until I found it. My dad made a snorting sound. "It says here that the lawyers for the accused are upset because the prisoners are being segregated and aren't allowed to meet each other. Meeting each other is what got them into trouble in the first place." "I guess so." "And do you know what's really annoying to me?" he asked. "These people have nothing but scorn for Western ways, for democracy, for freedom, but the minute they get caught, they scream and holler about their rights. If they were in a Muslim country and conspired to blow up buildings, do you think that they'd have any rights except the one to have a bullet put through their heads?" I didn't think he actually wanted me to answer that question, but I was going to anyways. "But we're not in a Muslim country. Here they're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty." "And do you think they're innocent?" my dad asked. "I don't know anything, except what I read, and it isn't much," I said. "If the police don't have evidence, they wouldn't have arrested them. And I guess we'll find out what that evidence is when it goes to court. It's just hard to believe that Azim would be a terrorist." "Azim, that's the kid from your school, right? You know him?" "He wasn't in my year, so I wouldn't say I knew him. He pretty much stayed to himself." My father nodded. "Lots of killers are loners." "I didn't say that. He had friends. It's just that they were brown kids, like him. The brown kids don't talk to me much." "That sounds like racism to me," he said. "Maybe, but I don't talk to them either." My mother set down the trays in front of us on the table. The food put an end to this discussion, and that suited me just fine. I was happy to have bacon for breakfast.